Recording in progress.
Just the frozen.
Come on. There we go. All right, welcome to the January 9th, 2023 regularly scheduled work session. Tonight, there are 2 items on the agenda. Public comment is allowed that is germane to an agenda item. If you wish to speak, you are required to fill out a public comment card, and if you are speaking on behalf of an organization, you must fill out an affidavit that you have the authority of said organization. Please remember, this is not a time to engage the mayor or members of the city council in conversation. When your name is called, please come forward and speak into the microphone stating your name and address for the record. Public comment will be allowed for a total of 10 minutes per agenda item and no more than 2 minutes per person. Once the item is called, no other public cards will be accepted. Before we begin, I would like to add an executive session to immediately follow the reports and presentation items. Okay?
Sorry, can't do it.
Can't do it?
It's
We'll
7:30.
be out of here in no time. Promise.
This looks like the Sarah Leader show.
Will the city clerk please sound agenda item A?
Mayor, the agenda item is the update on local
It
road
is.
safety
Sarah,
plan
Sarah.
implementation. Our Public Works Director, Ms. Sarah Leaders.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. We are nearing 6 months into the adoption of the local road safety plan, so thought this would be a good opportunity to give an update on some of the implementation that is underway with the local road safety plan. So I'll cover kind of where we are and where we're headed with implementation. Just to recap, in alignment with the strategic plan, the purpose of the local road safety plan is to chart a strategy to make improvements to Milton's transportation through engineering, education, and enforcement that respects Milton's rural heritage, enhances its quality of life, and makes our roadways as safe as possible. The plan included 6 emphasis areas as well as 2 focus areas. And these identified strategies and projects to improve safety throughout the city. So these were all the concerns that the list of strategies were focusing on addressing. This is a slide that showed our toolbox. So these are tools that are available to address concerns across different components of education, engineering, and enforcement. And I'll highlight some of those measures that we've taken across these components, starting with the police initiatives. So these are a couple of the things that have been underway since the adoption of the plan. First of all, a hands-free campaign that included both education as well as on-the-ground operations through our police department. They also focus on high complaint areas. So when they do get a traffic complaint, they use traffic count data to look at when and where speeds are occurring and to effectively deploy resources to act on those. Another program that our police department works with is the Alive at 25, and that's a 4-hour teen driving course. It's for targeted ages 16 to 24, which is one of our highest crash categories for accidents in the city. It's both a voluntary and also coordinated with court program. It's been offered 2 times a month, and registrations have been maxing out, so police is looking to add some additional courses in that program. Police uses reminders, tips, and info on bike safety, roundabout, school traffic, and other issues like the graphic on the right of this slide shows. It's a post from last week just indicating that schools are back in session and to look out for those walking and school buses within the school areas. And finally, police and public works do traffic safety coordination. So we have regular scheduled meetings where we review accident data, but we also look at case-by-case basis on things that we can do to support each other. And Chief Austin's here tonight in support of this presentation as well. So if there's any specific questions on these, when we get to the end, he's available for those to answer any of those questions. Another interdepartmental implementation is education and through our communications department. So this is an example of some education that we conducted related to wildlife, specifically deer. So we did a social media message during the heat of the deer season that this graphic was actually developed by a Milton High School student. So that was neat to be able to use something someone in the community provided, as well as social media to alert drivers to be on the lookout for deer, especially during that time of year. We also use some message boards in targeted areas to slow down and watch out for deer where they're identified as being a population of deer that crosses the road a lot. This shows a coordination with both the communications as well as one of the newly established committees. So the Milton Trails Advisory Committee established a cyclist subcommittee. And as part of that, at the most recent trails meeting, the group recommended a number of signs and locations to put out some of the state law signs related to passing bicyclists and the 3-foot minimum. Also did a social media post about it that generated a lot of comments and feedback and dialogue between the community. So the signs themselves served as education as well as the social media messaging. Speed studies, this has been of interest for a while, and this was one of the major outcomes of the local road safety plan, was to look at speed limits citywide. So in May of 2022, we counted 10 roads, which I'll show highlighted there. And what we looked at with those is where the adjoining roads had lower speed limits. So at county boundaries or city limit lines where the road segment became a lower speed as you crossed into the next jurisdiction. Across those 10 roads, we counted 15 specific locations and were able to just capture data from those different segments and the characteristics of those segments. We then utilized the same consultant that developed the local road safety plan to help us evaluate this initial set of data. So we looked at volumes, we looked at the 85th percentile speed. That's the speed where 15% of the cars are going faster and 85 are going that speed or lower. We looked at the average speed as well as which of these routes had a lot of bicycle usage. From that, we narrowed it down to 3 that we developed detailed studies on to submit to DOT for review of adjusting the speed limit. And those are the segment of Providence Road from Freemanville to the Alpharetta city limit, Bethany Way, the entire length, and then lastly, Southern Freemanville. We have 2 others we're looking at reviewing the speed limits, but they don't require DOT detailed studies like these speed limit changes. One of those is Ebenezer Road. So a part of that road is in Roswell and parts in Milton. The parts in Roswell are actually approved at 25 miles an hour and the Miltons are 45. So that's going to be an easy change to just match up to what the other roadway segments are. And lastly is Mayfield. We've got a small section that's more of a commercial section of Mayfield between the signal at Birmingham Highway and the Charlotte Drive and Heritage Walk roundabout. So that's less than 1/4 of a mile, which doesn't make it eligible for radar. And we felt like that was a good case to look at a kind of a commercial zoned speed limit to reduce that one. Next, another project we have underway is guardrail inventory. We've got a consultant looking at collecting data on where we have guardrails and giving us some upgrades and recommendation list for making those improvements. You all heard about this at the last council meeting, is the pedestrian flashing signs at the 2 roundabouts here in Crabapple on the state route. That's a proven safety countermeasure and one of the items that was in the local road safety plan as well. Freemanville at red, you'll see a little more on this one in the coming months as we get under development with our design, but we are looking to bring several of the countermeasures that were part of the local road safety plan as part of that project design. Working with the Trails Advisory Committee on where sidewalks and bike crossings and even equestrian crossings make sense for that corridor and that intersection improvement. So like I said, there will be a future presentation on this project once we get a little further underway. We've got 2 areas that recently had these flashing warning signs installed. The ones on Dinsmore aren't flashing yet, but these are pictures of these flashing warning signs approaching either curves or some of the roundabouts on Hopewell Road. These signs were actually funded with DOT safety money, and we're getting them installed as part of a city project. Related to the gravel roads that have multi-uses, we're looking at just acquired some new counting equipment. And so we're going to deploy those on some of the gravel roads to get not only vehicle counts, but also the counts of the other users to get a feel for what that balance looks like and what the distribution is between vehicles and other users to be able to recommend improvements that match what's being used. Plan to start this in the next couple weeks, the next month. It allows for continuous counting. The batteries last quite a long time, so it's flexible installation and will provide a good baseline of some data on the gravel roads. And also we're coordinating those counts and what we do with those with the Trails Committee as well. On PTVs, one of the other focus areas, we've done a bit of education related to these, developed a website specific to PTVs, put message boards up around the Crabapple area. The ordinance was revised in November, and we're looking to start the registration process in early 2023 in coordination with police and finance. And lastly, we're hoping to have some information back on this grant, but we have not heard back on the federal grant that we submitted for in September. That was going to be for $14.5 million for quite a bit of infrastructure and countermeasures that would represent the local road safety plan. So again, what that project was, what that funding request was, are these roads shown on the map, and multiple treatments along these, from a bikeable shoulder to narrower lanes, center line, rumble strips, curve evaluations, just a full range of implementation if we were to get this funding. So what's to come? We plan to expand and continue incremental speed limit evaluations. We didn't want to attack a lot of roads at one time. We wanted to get underway with a couple, see what DOT's response to that was, see what criteria they considered, what we could use going forward. So we plan to expand on that. And as a road lowers, now it becomes a connecting roadway with a lower speed limit. So we're able to expand that network across the city. We are going to look for other opportunities for GDOT safety funding for the pedestrian flashing signs, continued trail prioritization and implementation in coordination with the Trails Committee. Can continue to advance intersection improvements. Hope to hear some information back on that SS4A Safe Streets for All federal grant. So if awarded, that's going to be a big key to future implementation. And lastly, in 2023, we hope to kick off our transportation plan, and that's going to help us further define projects, initiatives, as well as evaluate what we've done overall for the system. And be glad to answer any questions or go back to any slides.
Andrea?
Can you go back to the slide that shows the roundabout at Itasca? So this was posted on social media, and I like to follow some of that and just read through the questions that a lot of our citizens post. Keep going back to, oh yeah, perfect. Okay, so one of the questions that was brought up, and a few people kind of chimed in, was where the crosswalks are. They were wondering, a few wondered why the crosswalks were so close to where you're coming like out of the roundabout, and then you immediately hit a crosswalk where someone could be crossing. Why couldn't they be pushed back a little bit so you could have time to stop for that crosswalk?
I know specifically on the entering side, it's designed to fit one car that stopped at the yielding point entering the roundabout.
Okay.
So that's the entering side, and the exiting, again, it could be, you could offset it slightly to be a little closer to the roundabout, but it's also at a point where once a vehicle exits, that they then have a clear line of sight straight ahead. So there is some national guidance on where those are placed, and it's typically to get the best visibility for the
Okay.
pedestrian. There is a lot going on with roundabouts though, and we're feel like these flashing warning signs will help draw that more attention to.
Yeah,
to
I
the
figured there were
pedestrian.
national guidelines and everything, but a few people had questions and I was like, I'm not going to answer them online, but if I see them in person, I can. And then the second question that came up where Six Bridges is, that outdoor area will have a lot of traffic. People are out there sitting, eating, enjoying a beverage, crossing the street, walking around. Is there any consideration of some sort of not a guardrail, because that is not the look we're going for, but something that kind of protects that section if someone's coming through the roundabout and maybe misses that turn a little bit? There's going to be a lot of people kind of outdoors in that area.
That's something we can look at more if there's like kind of a decorative like bollard that's used in access to buildings. Usually those are they're spaced out so that they still give, they're not a physical barrier, but they provide some form of protection. So that's something we can look at further.
Okay,
around
yeah, I
those-
was just curious.
those
Someone brought it
approaches.
up and I was like, that kind of makes sense.
I will echo her point. I mean, I stand out there sometimes like, oh,
The cars coming around the
Well, and the
roundabout and
same-
you're
the kids
sitting
are
out
playing out
there.
there, I'm
Yeah,
just
and
like,
there's a lot
oh,
of kids
yeah.
and,
The same thing on the Nest side.
right,
Too, where you've got outdoor dining right there might be another place
on
to
those
look at.
two, yeah.
Okay.
Do we
yeah.
have, can Greg respond to those things? Where are you looking?
It's
What-
on Facebook.
Facebook.
And
okay.
I think it's Greg that puts all of that out there. I don't know if
We respond to the things people.
some of them we do. Yeah, we do.
Yeah, we generally respond to the ones that are in ours, but we're not going to get on to some of the private ones that
Yeah.
are out there.
Paul, do you got a comment?
Yeah, a couple questions. Sarah, if you can go to the one that the map that had all the roads in different colors, there was one that had, I think it was Freemanville noted at 45 on the top, and you were suggesting that Freemanville south of Providence was going to be at a lower speed. Now, Freemanville on the north end of it above Providence is 45, and south of Providence is already 40. And we're looking at lowering south of Freemanville further before we lower anything on Freemanville North?
We are. We had some data with the bridge project there that gave us some real data on the design speed of some of the vertical curves. And it was actually designed at a 35 mile an hour. So that's part of our report, was using that data.
Yeah.
And this will be the first one we've asked for to go from 40 down to 35. So
Right.
to see how responsive DOT is to that versus a 45 going to a 40.
A lot of the input that I get from the community and what I see on social media is we've got a couple of Audubons here in particular. Freemanville is one, Bethany is another.
Providence.
Providence is the third. And I sure hope that there's a way we can accelerate the rest of those, Freemanville North, Providence, and Bethany, because those are age-old concerns to the community that are always out there. And if we can pick off some of the ones that are getting a lot of the visibility, especially on social media, I think that would serve us well. If there's a way to look at that. I know you've got a very detailed process. I don't mean to suggest that we compromise the process, but to get some easy wins with the community, those would be some high visibility ones I would hope that we could take a hard look at. Second, as you and I talked just briefly as we were walking in about the feedback that we got on the posting about the share the road with cyclists. I didn't think to ask you in our conversation, is there any, as you read those, because there were a lot, and there were I think over 100, if not over 200. And was there anything that you learned? Was there any takeaway at this point, or is it too early to? Because for the rest of the group, what I saw was we posted this very positive, taking this step in the right direction, and oh my goodness, the vitriol that came out on both sides. The drivers angry at the cyclists for cyclists now getting this preferential treatment with these signs, and heck with the cyclists, they're a problem for the drivers. It was both ways, and it was absolutely vicious. And here we thought we're taking a really positive, which I believe is a really positive step in the right direction. We're not gonna walk away from the cycling community just because there's some angry motorists. We've got to find a way for these two communities to coexist in a far better way than they are today. That was absolutely the right step. First one, kind of a minor, in terms of impact and visibility, but what a right first step. And then to see it get that kind of vitriol was surprising to me, really surprising to me. So has there anybody? Are we going to take a minute and we get a lot more participation, I think, in our social media than we do, obviously, in the audience, even on nights like tonight when we're talking about this. Are we going to do a sort of a debrief on that?
I think the couple of things that jumped out to me in the comments that were received on this graphic I've got pulled up now, it was the understanding of what the law is, that the 3 feet is, we're restating the state law, and then the law regarding groups of cyclists, and that what it means to that one of the cyclists explained the riding in a group, and that what that means. So that might be a good takeaway, is to
one of the things that the community was very outspoken about was the large pelotons.
Right.
Peloton, however you pronounce it.
Peloton.
And what the driving community was not sensitive to, that I learned from reading that social media post, was they do that for their own protection. But there's safety in number. It forces the drivers to stop, to think about how, when, and where they can pass. But obviously it's a frustration because they're caught behind the larger group. They have to find a way to coexist with that too. Okay. Something else that came to mind that I didn't want to forget, but now I have.
Could I say something while you're?
Yeah.
Chief, I know that you have had your ticket patrol folks out, and I've certainly seen them stopping people. And I know they've been over in our area in Providence and Freemanville and all around up in there. And I've seen a number of cars stopped in the last couple of months, like more than a handful. So I feel like there's some action happening with that, and I'm very appreciative. Thank you.
Glad to hear. Thank you. Thank you.
I know what it was. Chief, I got one for you too. But Sarah, in the gathering of the trails, or the reactivated trails committee, and the input from the cycling participants in that, was there, one of the things that I know from talking to Mike Moss, who's one of the cycling advocates, he leads, I think, one of the groups. He's not president. Maybe he isn't currently president, but he has been for a long time. A lot of their riding is off of the main thoroughfares. And was there any discussion about helping to identify roads like his group rides, to get some of the other cycling clubs that are out there maybe to follow suit and get off of the thoroughfares in critical peak hours? Was there any discussion about that? Or is that something that we can introduce if it hasn't been discussed?
I think that's something we could introduce as part of some future outreach or efforts related to the bike safety initiative. Maybe that becomes one of the strategies related to that, is these options for riding during peak times, and where the off the main road kind of options are, and that those are available.
I know that Mike's very outspoken about, they get a good ride in with some good distances at speeds that they want to ride at, but primarily off of the main thoroughfares. He's very outspoken about the connectivity of some of the neighborhoods where they can ride and be out of harm's way. It would be a great win for everybody if we can capitalize on some of the things that Mike's already doing. So I encourage you to follow up with that. Chief, thanks. I will speak firsthand to some, knowing that our enforcement is working on the hands-free driving. I was talking to someone who will remain nameless, but somebody that we all know yesterday, who was pulled over while we were talking because he was holding his phone, so it's working. Thanks for taking that to a higher level. But I've also got one question. I know that we've had a lot of things distracting us of late that have had us maybe off of our usual patrols because we're increasing patrols in other needed areas of late. But we also sometimes fall back into that same pattern of the cars being where we can anticipate them. One of the things I think you shared with me a while ago was the value of being consistently inconsistent
Correct.
with where the cars are going to be.
Right.
I know I just thought myself the other night, I know that I'm scooting down Bethany. I need to make sure when I'm approaching this one intersection, I better be sensitive to my speed. I usually am, but I would just maybe refresh the encouragement for being consistently inconsistent.
Sure.
Seeing some of the patterns coming back into play.
Certainly do that. A lot of times we're sort of chasing our high crash areas.
Yeah.
And that's based on that
And you need
28
them in
cycle.
proximity, I'm sure.
And it's no surprise to anyone that those same areas keep coming up. And a lot of it has to do also with line of sight with a radar. There are only certain places on some of these roadways that the officers can actually get that line of sight that they need, that the state law requires for them to run radar. So they have to be in that, unfortunately, that one particular location. I know exactly what location you're talking about as well. But yeah, I will speak to our traffic officers and our patrol officers.
Just
That'll
just
mix it up a
an
little.
occasional reminder, and they're
Absolutely.
very good at what they do. And the last thing I want to do is call them out for anything because they're fantastic. Our police are some of the best in the world. So, but just maybe a refresher on that.
Thank you. I'll certainly remind
Yeah,
them.
thanks. Okay, I've got one more, then I'm
We're
done.
cutting you off.
Sorry,
There's a
I
game
know.
tonight.
Sorry, I was one who was talking about it. On the pilot program for the counting, I think that's great, and I think we know we've got some issues that need to be addressed when we're talking about some of the congestion and with the communities that are incurring the high traffic, foot traffic in particular, on some of our gravel roads. I'm just wondering, do we have enough devices to consider doing a test of same time to see if there's any correlation between foot traffic increase or decrease on Wood Road in particular, and foot traffic increase or decrease at the new park with Milton Central Park that we have just added. It's now going to be our first season, the summer season coming. It's going to be open. Can we see if there's a direct correlation of reduction in one, increase in the other, or is it not working? So just food for thought as to one part of your test you might want to consider conducting. Sorry, then I'm done.
No, that's good. Any other questions for Sarah for now? And then, all right, good. Thank you. Will the city clerk please sound item B?
Mayor, item B is the environmental initiatives update given by our environmental program manager, Miss Emily Groth.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and Council, and Happy New Year. I'll be relatively quick. I know there's a game tonight. Tonight, I just wanted to provide some updates on some environmental projects and initiatives and speak to the impact that we made last year as well. So some upcoming projects that I'll touch on tonight are our green community certification, the discussion around electric vehicles, GREENSPACE planning, and some committee updates. The last year was a great year for recycling and public engagement, and I think we made a great impact. Most notably, we recycled almost 70 tons of glass at our glass recycling bin at Bell Park, almost 8 tons of electronics at one electronics recycling event, and 8 tons of paint and 4.5 tons of household hazardous waste at the larger event this past September. We also maintained our community wildlife habitat certification for 10 years now in a row. We handed out 4 environmental education mini grants at our local schools, which include Milton High School, Northwestern Middle School, Summit Hill Elementary, and Cogburn Woods Elementary. And those projects were based on gardening improvements at their school garden, composting, and education and class curriculum that relate to those projects. We also did 30+ road and trail cleanups with our Adopt a Road program and our events like Rivers Alive that was held in October. So the first project for the new year is Green Communities, and that is our certification with Atlanta Regional Commission to encourage municipal sustainability. And it's a certification program that we've held since 2012. So city governments can certify every 4 years, and we were bronze in 2012 and 2016. And we recently upgraded to silver in 2021. And so every 2 years within that 4-year mandatory window is an option and an opportunity to upgrade your certification. And we have the opportunity for gold this spring. There's a 45-point difference that we have to meet with some various projects. So we're 45 points away, and I think it's a good shot. But we're still 2 years out from the mandatory 4 years. So I think it's worth it, and we can do some cool projects that would continue our meaningful impact. And along with the program, it requires a lot of documentation and reporting. And what we use now is a council-approved 2012 green resolution. So what you'll probably see coming up in the near term is an updated resolution to include a lot of these various projects that we can get points for. Some of these projects to work towards this gold opportunity is some sustainable purchasing policies like green appliances and green fleets like hybrid vehicles, some individual programs like community gardens and composting, green space planning, electric vehicle readiness, and community education and business outreach. Second project that I'd like to explore is electric vehicles. Our strategic plan calls for the increase of number of electronic vehicle charging stations on public and private property in Milton with 5% growth by the end of this plan by 2025. And so the conversation of EV readiness plays into green communities, which is a project that we can tackle for green communities and for our strategic plan. So there's been increasing conversations about EV readiness, both statewide and in North Fulton. The Georgia DOT is working to implement their Georgia EV infrastructure deployment plan, and they've highlighted main thoroughfares and highways throughout the state where they're going to fund EV infrastructure. And a couple months ago, staff had attended a stakeholder meeting specifically for North Fulton, along with Georgia Power, to discuss this statewide infrastructure deployment plan. So these are increasing conversations that I think we would benefit from. Right now, we have 2 private charging stations in Milton, located at the Bethany Bend Publix and Kohl's. And so some next steps to continue EV discussions would be a Go EV resolution that would fall into that updated green resolution that I mentioned for green communities. Some conversations about private development ordinances that our neighboring cities have for buildings or parking lots, as well as we can discuss options for public EV infrastructure like maintenance and management and potential cost sharing of this equipment. And then lastly, I'd like to introduce the GreenSpace Plan project, which is another project that also falls in line with our Shot for Gold with green communities. Our strategic plan calls for a green space plan or strategy, and this plan would identify appropriate usage management and possible improvements on green space properties that respect Milton's rural heritage and align with sustainable best practices. So we've begun some internal discussions as far as who would be the key stakeholders, these key elements that we'll be discussing, and a potential timeline. The stakeholders will be our city committees, our Green Space Committee, Parks and Rec Advisory Board, Trails Committee, Equestrian Committee, and Planning Commission as well. And then we'll also host input sessions and opportunities for public comment from the general public, as well as property-specific neighbors that surround all these various properties. The key elements that we'll be discussing and asking for input would be future improvements, appropriate use and special considerations based on like the specific topography of different properties and where it's located in the city. We can discuss different environmental protection measures and the prioritization of properties, opening timeline, and the implementation of the plan. The timeline is ongoing, starting pretty recently, and we'll be requesting input and hosting committee meetings through March with council check-in points. And it's proposed that council consideration and adoption could occur this summer. And then lastly, with all these projects, I just wanted to give a brief update on all these various committees that will be very important with these upcoming projects. The GreenSpace Plan will assist with overseeing the planning and implementation of the GreenSpace Plan. We'll be asking for their input on those main key elements, like those future improvements and appropriate uses, since they know the property back from when the GreenSpace bond was approved in 2016. The Trails Committee, like Sarah mentioned earlier this evening, are working on projects focusing on user-based connectivity, like cycling, equestrians, and walkers. And then the upcoming Sustainability Committee will focus on all of these various projects, as well as updating our solid waste management plan, going for the second round of funding from the Georgia EPD for the Recycling and Waste Diversion Grant for recycling infrastructure citywide. And then they'll also assist with events and public engagement, like those numbers that we saw on the 2022 overview slide. We've got a lot of good things going this year, and I just wanted to give you a quick update, and I'm here for any questions.
Thanks, Emily. Any questions for Emily? Paul, then Andre, then Jan?
Just one, Emily, on the EV program, as we're looking to take our readiness to a higher level with the current administration's, I can't remember what the program is called, but it's the infrastructure bill. Is there money available to us through that that we can capitalize on? And are we to the point where we're ready to apply for that kind of stuff, if it is?
All I know of right now is at the state level, I believe that Georgia EV infrastructure deployment plan that DOT is running with has come from out of that infrastructure bill at the state level, but I can explore more options locally.
Okay, yeah, it'd be great if we can apply as a community, local community too.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
I've only seen one advertisement related to the infrastructure bill. It wasn't that. I don't know if that's going to be flow through from the state, like Emily just discussed, or not.
Yeah, obviously if that money's out there, if it's,
We'll dig deeper.
sounds like
into
we're
it.
on top of it anyway, so good deal.
We'll dig deeper into it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'll get
Audrey,
help with
you
the
have
Queen of
Emily,
Fans.
just real quick, what was, for the Sustainability Committee, can you just remind me of the dates of when we were targeting to have that committee formed and when you would need our nominees for that?
Last time I spoke to you guys, I believe we were targeting the end of January for appointments.
Okay.
And then the first meeting would be in February.
Thank you.
And Emily, she sent me a few. Actually, I had to ask and gave me some good ones. So thank you.
Yeah.
Jan?
Yeah, the paint collection, when we do that,
Yeah.
I got a lot of calls that by the time they get to the phone, all the slots are taken. So my two questions. One is the cost so high for us that we can't expand that? And if we can't expand it, can we come up with what these homeowners can do with their paint if they can't come to us?
Yeah, so for your first question, a lot of these recyclables, these hazardous waste materials are not accepted at regional recycling centers or curbside. So we have to make sure that they get recycled and disposed of properly, which means sometimes like incineration or other chemical processes that are quite costly. And so that's kind of our limiting factor right now. We can work closely with the second round of funding for Environmental Protection Division for different grants. A lot of times you can find different grants for household hazardous waste events. And then local options for specifically paint that I usually give to residents that reach out are the Global Paint Disposal is a nonprofit that will sometimes schedule at-home pickups and take your paint and ship it off internationally for rehab projects, like painting schools in Africa. And then there's also Atlanta Paint Disposal that you can schedule at-home pickup for a cost.
Can we publish that, a list of things that they can do or something?
Yeah, I believe generally that lives on our city website now, but I can
Oh,
definitely.
okay.
Yeah, I'll increase that communication as well.
Thank you.
Good, Steve. You're reaching there.
Yeah,
Okay.
so a lot of the paint issues we have, a lot of these things don't have to go into a special pickup. That you can remediate those at latex at home, and there's directions. I think there might be a video on our site.
Yeah, all you have to do is put an absorbent in there.
That's it. Kitty litter.
Isn't all this, I mean, you're talking about rarity, oil-based or something, or a lacquer.
Yeah.
99% of the people out there have latex. This is much ado about nothing.
So we're trying to educate through our site. So if we can direct people into the site when they have those questions, perhaps we have the solution, perhaps we don't. But the mayor and I also recently met with a potential resource for us as well, for those that you can't remediate in that manner. And we're going to continue working through that process as well, because it is a very expensive venture when we do. It's $20-something thousand.
Yeah,
Thanks, Emily.
thank you.
Good stuff.
Thanks, Emily.
Thank you very much.
Ken, do we need a motion to adjourn to
We can
executive?
make a motion to adjourn to executive session for the 3 reasons.
Okay, I'd like to have a motion to adjourn into executive session to discuss potential litigation, personnel, and/or
Land acquisition.
land acquisition.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we adjourn for a special session, executive session, so that we can talk about personnel, possible land acquisition,
Potential
Or-
litigation.
or what,
Potential litigation.
or potential litigation, and maybe the game.
We will not be talking about that, right? All right.
We will not.
Second.
All right.
Keep it serious.
All in
Thank
favor,
you.
say aye.
Aye.
Who is